install on these machines. It's a hard process with a lot of changes to be made. These are some good loops. MapReduce tutorial, MapReduce tutorial, writing and running your first. Of the first 10 examples I saw where somebody would try to teach you how to run a Hadoop job, they all used exactly the same problem. It's called the word count problem. It's a little bit, it's the hello world of Hadoop. Everybody uses it, right? And it's the one we're going to use. And it's a nice one because it's pretty easy to explain. So before I go into that, I'm just going to look at one of the articles to give you a little bit of a flavor. You have to have a Java installed because it runs on Java, so you have to set it up, and then you have to update your paths. Now, one thing we did, and it seems all the articles do this, and I'm not 100% sure why, is they don't install the Hadoop and run it under their own account. They always set up a second account and put everything in there. So there's another account called HD user on your system. So you can say sudo and then SU, which stands, I assume, for switch user, HD user, and it'll let you switch user. And you're going to have to keep your head about you as to which user you're in. When we start pushing up our orders that we've generated in Mongo, we'll be in BC user. And we'll play around with them, and we'll format them, and we'll get them into a file somewhere. And then we will switch to HD user and pull them across into that other world and process them. All right. The other time is when we're going to do this word example we're going to do in class today. We're going to go out to one of these public sites that has 1 million books online, and we're going to pull 3 books down. I found that easier to do it as BC user and then push them over to the HD user. I think the HD user password, well, I'm sure, is either the same BC user or it's HD user. I can't remember which one it is, but it's consistent in one of 2 dimensions. It's either the same as the one or it's the same as the name, as is the first. And then you have to set up SSH because in a real system, you would push this off to 8 machines, and you would have to have sort of control over those 8 machines, so you could be inserting and running jobs. So you have to do all that, which has been done already. You have to disable IPv6 because it's not happy with it. Then you actually get around to installing it, and then you install the HD file system. This is a nice diagram of the HD file system. And again, they're sort of showing how you might have some data on some machines in one rack and some in another rack so that you have power and isolation between them. And then in addition to the data nodes, which actually hold the data, there's what I would call the directory, which is if you ask, on a Windows system, if you ask for a file, it goes to the Windows file system and it looks up the name and it maps it to physical blocks on the disk. Okay, so the same thing is going on here. There's a name server, directory server, and it itself, to be highly available, is probably running on 3 or 5 nodes. It's probably running in what I would call synchronous mode, which is every time you do an update, it locks until they're all in sync. Otherwise, you could corrupt the file system. So while our files, in terms of us reading and writing data, are this thing called eventually consistent, I believe the naming system and the file system we're using, HDFS, its metadata server, which keeps track of where everything is, probably runs synchronous because you don't create new files that often. Once you've created it, it's done, and then you can do whatever you want to the data. So every time you go to open a file, your system will make a reference to there to get the real, where it currently is. Because you might think it's here, and this machine might have melted yesterday, and it copied all the files onto another machine. So that name server is really an important function. It gives the system the flexibility of treating all the disk drives in the cluster as just disk drives, and it owns them all, and it can move anything at once. We got to set up some environmental stuff, and we have to change the configuration. We got to change all these files, and then the HDFS system, now that it's installed, is just like getting a brand new disk or something. You have to format the system, which means what's going on here, I imagine, is finding out what disks it owns. It's bringing them into a named collection, and then it's initializing them with some sort of a directory structure so that it can go and, like, every time it wants to put files there, it can make notes on that disk that that's where these files are. So this has already been done. And then we're going to start our cluster, and we'll look at this later. Stopping is probably important. You know, if you're running on a machine that you think is going to stay up, I don't think it's a big deal to leave Linux running, but I would shut down Hadoop, because if it breaks, it'll be a real pain to go back to a new version of Linux and redo the whole thing, or uninstall and reinstall it. You don't want to do that. Download the example input, copy, then you got to copy the data into the Hadoop file system. We're going to download the data into the Linux file system, copy it to the Hadoop file system, and then process it over there. And then we'll copy the data back out. Okay, that's all I wanted to point out in that article. And as I said here, there's 2 articles, and they had slightly different instructions in it. Some things sort of didn't work in one, and some things sort of didn't work at the other, but between the 2 of them, I got it to work. Okay, so we have this user. So at this point, you should change to HD user by going switch user HD user, and I will try to go back to my Linux system here. DC user, log in, and then I'm not even sure where I am at this point. I might actually log in. Is there some command that says show me who I am? Oh yeah, I can see it in the console.
Who am I?
All I need to do is see what, who am I?
Yeah.
Who
I
am
believe I believe that's it. Who am I?
No spaces.
No space.
So this is saying HD user, so I think that tells me that I am HD user without even typing who am I. So I'm already HD user.
What's the password? Is it PC user also?
Here's the good old software updater that at least once a day says, can I please corrupt your system? No, thank you. Now, my directions say to create these 2 directories because I forgot. I'm suspicious that we really need to do this, number 1. And number 2, unfortunately, I don't know what directory I'm in when I execute that. I have a suspicion that I should be in this directory when I do it. And in fact, just for fun, let's do it, because it never hurts to create a directory. And it may hurt not to have it there. So I assume you guys know all this better than I do, but in the Linux directory structure, there's something called home. And under home, we have BC user and HD user. But then if you go up to the top and come back down, there's this user folder, and then there's this thing called local, and in there is a folder called Hadoop. And that's where the Hadoop is installed, and that's the easiest directory to be in when we run Hadoop jobs and everything, because then it'll all be relative to that directory. So we want to change directory to a user blah, blah, blah. So if I go over here, I don't even know where I am, but where am I? I'm actually there already. I'm already in user local Hadoop. Do I need to wait until people get there?
And now run those two commands?
What?
It makes you make directions.
Yeah, so now, I'm gonna do those commands there. I'm not sure that's right. But like I said, it certainly won't hurt to have those there. I wonder if I could cut and paste from here all the way until Linux on bed nine.
Where are these files located? Are they in files? The instructions. He's referring to.
It's in, big data, and then it's
There's
student
another-
user use.
Okay, thanks.
I have no idea what I just did. Something sort of bad just happened there. I think I probably had random garbage in my paste bucket and I just pasted in there. All right. So what do I want to do? I want to sudo make a directory. What does dash p mean?
Where? Or,
Direct-
isn't dash P port? I think lowercase p is port. I don't know what it means in the but yeah, I don't know.
Okay, so the password for HD user is BC user. So there's one password that's the same for both accounts. Right, so I just did that, hopefully that works. And now we're gonna change the ownership. So we're gonna say sudo change ownership of user.
Do you know what the second password is? For both password sets?
Should be HD user.
I don't think we're stopping it now.
Okay. All right, so now we have that directory. The rest of this stuff that's in this Word document, up until we get to this word count part, if you go to Canvas, there is a file in Canvas called Hadoop Info Spring blah, blah, blah. Okay? This is text file, which you should probably download because it's got a bunch of commands you can cut and paste from. So for example, in mine, let's go through this before we actually start doing anything. That's, the first thing is just a note, you may need it later, which is where are these other examples of the Hadoop? And they're in there. I put that in there because depending on how you install Hadoop, they could be somewhere else. Okay, they're really there, I went and found them. And then the sources for those are there. And those are Java files, and we're gonna use one of them. Okay, so again, Hadoop was installed under new user, HD user, change that user, starting Hadoop. So we're gonna start up this, what could be a 20-node cluster, and it would literally send commands to all of them and start them up. We only have one node, okay? So you wanna be in the correct directory, this user local Hadoop, and you should see something like that. Now, we're gonna type start-all.shell, and then you're gonna stand back and it's gonna complain about everything. When I did this a year ago, I thought, well, it's because I'm using old software, right? I updated Linux to the latest, I brought down the latest version of everything, and it's still complaining about it. Anyhow, that's the world of open software. Good enough is good enough. So anyhow, if you type startall.sh, it'll say, oh, that's deprecated, don't use that, run these two commands instead. But it works, it starts them up. And then as it's starting up all these processes, it's starting up the file system and a bunch of other things, it's gonna start the node manager, which keeps track of what nodes are alive. It's gonna start this resource manager, the name node, which is where you go to find out where stuff is, and the data node, which probably controls the HDF. You'll have to type in the password 4 times before it finally completes. So do that now. And again, I'm going to cut and paste a lot because I'm such a horrible typer. So I'm going to go there and there.
So it says to go into into SBin first.
Say that again?
In your text file, it actually has us go in another level down in SBin, Hadoop.
Oh, it does?
/ SBin.
Let's see, what does it say?
Well,
I think it finds it
okay.
because it's already started.
So we wind up by putting the password in several times, is that what
Yeah,
you're
you're
saying?
going to put it in 4 times. Pass PC user.
I see what you do.
I can see.
Mine's failing because I never stopped it. It's still running from yesterday. Remember how I told you you should absolutely stop it?
Yep.
Don't ever do what I say, don't do what I do. All right, where's my stop? I'm gonna stop.
Stop-DFS.
Stop, start all,
Stop all.sh.
yeah, stop all. I'm gonna stop it all just so that you can see the same screens when I hit start. Now, this one's gonna ask me for my password several times as well. I think I have 2 scripts running at the same time. I think one of them is trying to stop things, and the other one's